What if I told you that one of the most famous sculptures in the world holds a secret no one ever really talks about? You've seen it before: broad shoulders, clenched fists, that intense posture frozen in bronze. But here's the twist. It's not just a man sitting and thinking. It's a mirror. A mirror pointed straight at us. And maybe the real question isn't what he's thinking about, but why we stopped thinking like him. We scroll endlessly, talk fast, and fill every quiet moment with noise. Stillness makes us anxious. Silence feels like failure. But this sculpture? It dares to do nothing but think. It stares into the abyss and waits. And in a world desperate for quick answers, the thinker whispers a deeper truth, one that could shake your reality if you let it. Ready to find out what it is? There's a certain kind of silence that speaks louder than words. The Thinker, sculpted by Auguste Rodin, captures that silence with a striking intensity, one that echoes through time. At first glance, it's just a man, seated, hunched over, lost in thought. But the more you look, the more the enigmas multiply. Every muscle is tense, as if the very act of thinking is a battle. It's not just a statue, it's a storm of philosophy, art, and inner conflict frozen in bronze. And that's exactly what makes it unforgettable. Rodin wasn't just showing off technical talent, though let's be honest, his mastery of anatomy and texture would make even Michelangelo raise an eyebrow. No, this was something deeper. This piece became a turning point in his career, a symbol of his ability to bring mystery and motion into stillness. He gave sculpture a voice, one that didn't need to shout. And this voice, this style, would come to define not just his work, but an entire chapter in the history of modern art. But of course, every masterpiece has a backstory, and the thinker's tale begins long before the bronze was ever cast. Back in 1880, Rodin received a government commission for a decorative portal called the Gates of Hell, inspired by Dante's Inferno. And guess what? The thinker wasn't meant to be a standalone icon at all. He was originally the poet, sitting at the top of the gate, representing Dante himself, gazing over the chaos below. That's right. This universal symbol of introspection started as just one fragment in a much larger universe of myth and madness. It took Rodin over a decade to complete the first large-scale cast of the Thinker. The 1880s and 90s were no easy time for a sculptor trying to break rules. The art world was still haunted by the ghost of classical tradition. Polished marbles, idealized forms, and predictable poses. But Rodin? He went rogue. He chiseled imperfection. He celebrated tension. He injected raw mystery into every curve. That alone was revolutionary. And when he began showing his fragmented works separately from the gates, he didn't just shift his career. He shifted the conversation about what art could be. But why choose this particular figure, this lone man thinking, as the focal point? That's where things get really interesting. Rodin didn't invent the thinker out of thin air. He was reaching deep, into literature, philosophy, and even his own restlessness. As we've seen, the original idea came from Dante, the Italian poet who imagined walking through hell in search of meaning. But as Rodin worked and reworked the sculpture, something shifted. It stopped being just Dante. It became universal. A man facing the fire of his own mind. A symbol of every human who's ever paused to wrestle with the enigmas of existence. You know that moment before a life-changing decision? When your body is still, but your brain is louder than a crowd? That's the space Rodin carved into bronze. Some say the figure echoes Michelangelo's Il Penseroso. Others claim it was inspired by Rodin himself. He was known to sit just like that, shoulders curled, fingers pressed to his lips, thinking obsessively. Maybe that's why it feels so real. It's not about divine revelation or artistic ego. It's about the mystery of thought. And little did Rodin know, this raw expression of inner conflict would strike a nerve across the globe once it was finally unveiled. When the Thinker was first exhibited on its own in 1904, it didn't just grab attention. It stopped people in their tracks. This wasn't your typical heroic figure. He wasn't posing in glory or triumph. He was thinking. And somehow that hit harder. In a world used to celebrating action, Rodin dared to immortalize introspection. Suddenly, contemplation wasn't a sign of hesitation, it was a new kind of strength. A revolution in bronze. Critics and admirers alike were divided. Some hailed it as genius, others were unsettled by its rawness. But that tension only added to the mystique. What was he thinking about? Was he mourning? Planning? Regretting? The lack of a clear answer made the sculpture more powerful, not less. It invited interpretation, sparked debates, and refused to be boxed into a single meaning. And soon, its fame began to spread, not just across art circles, but into the cultural bloodstream. And as it journeyed from gallery to gallery, museum to museum, the story of this solitary figure only deepened. After its standalone debut, the thinker began multiplying. Literally. Rodin approved multiple castings in bronze, and soon, this brooding figure started popping up all over the world. From the Musée Rodin in Paris to the gates of Columbia University in New York, to the entrance of the Rodin Museum in Philadelphia. Each new location added another layer to its history, another cultural lens through which people tried to decipher the same mystery. What's wild is how this sculpture didn't just stay in the art world. It seeped into politics, philosophy, even pop culture. During both World Wars, the thinker was seen as a symbol of human resilience. In the 1960s, it was reinterpreted by students questioning the world. And today? It sits in gardens and plazas, often imitated but never equaled. It has even found its way into cartoons and advertisements. Yes, really. From elite salons to bathroom wall posters, the thinker crossed boundaries no sculpture had before. But even as his fame spread, there were still secrets, quirky intimate details, that many never noticed. Here's a fun twist. The thinker wasn't always called the thinker. Early on, Rodin simply referred to him as the poet. And get this. The original version was just 70 centimeters tall. That's right, smaller than a toddler. It wasn't until years later that the larger-than-life casts we now know were created. So, that massive statue you might see at a museum? It's technically a sequel. A sequel to a poet, not a philosopher. Talk about a plot twist in the history of art. Another curiosity? Most people think he's peacefully pondering. But if you really look, you'll notice his toes are clenched. His back is curved like he's carrying the weight of 1,000 thoughts. That's no Zen monk meditating. That's a man wrestling with enigmas, caught in the act of mental battle. Even his nudity has meaning. Stripped of identity, class or context, he's simply a soul, thinking. Which begs the question, thinking about what? That, my friend, is where it gets personal. More than a century has passed, and still, the thinker sits. Unmoved, yet endlessly moving. In a world obsessed with speed, distraction, and constant noise, Rodin's sculpture reminds us of the timeless value of pausing. Of feeling the weight of our own questions. Of wrestling with the mystery of who we are, what we want, and why we're even here. It's not just a piece of art. It's a mirror. One that reflects not our image, but our interior world. And maybe that's why he endures. He doesn't offer answers. He doesn't judge. He just thinks. And invites us to do the same. To reflect on our style of living, our choices, our silences. In that way, the thinker isn't just about Rodin's talent or vision. It's about us. Each of us. The way we navigate our own private labyrinths. But before we fall too deep into that reflection, there's a question we still haven't answered. And it might just change the way you see everything. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you really stopped to think? Not about your schedule, your bills, or your phone, but about your life. About your purpose, your beliefs, your fears? The thinker wasn't carved to impress. He was carved to confront. He's a statue, sure, but also a silent revolution. One that dares you to question everything, including the way you're living right now. So what are you avoiding? What truth have you buried under distractions? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're building a space for reflection here. And if this message sparked something in you, subscribe and hit that bell. There's more mystery, more art, and more truth coming your way. And trust me, you don't want to miss it.